a couple weeks ago, I guess, you were trending on Twitter again, and I've found that you're never trending on Twitter for good reasons.
No.
This one was a particularly contentious one. You were trending for days on end because you got, as you put it in your New York Times op-ed, you were canceled by the Presbyterian Church of America. So why don't you sort of tell that story, and then we can get into the weeds on it.
Yeah, Jonah, I went through the dreaded 3-stage trend. So trend when they invited me, trend again when they canceled me, and then trend again when I wrote about it. So nobody wants that. Nobody needs that in their lives.
It's the trend trifecta.
The trend trifecta. Yeah, it's a wild story. So my wife and I had been part of the PCA. That's the Presbyterian Church in America. That's what we call it. Really, since we moved to Philly when I was president of FIRE back in 2004. And loved the church we found there, 10th Presbyterian, loved the denomination. People were wonderful to us. When we moved from Philly, we literally picked our house in part because it was so close to a wonderful little PCA church. And then, I don't need to rehash everything that happened with the rise of Trump. We've been through all of this, but the bottom line is that our life got different after we came out against Trump in 2015 and 2016. And eventually it was bad enough. In other words, there were enough people who would confront us at church, confront my wife, enough racial comments about my daughter, racial comments to my other kids about my daughter, that we just didn't feel like we could continue to worship in a PCA church without constantly looking over our shoulders and without periodically some really awful stuff happening to our youngest daughter. And so we moved to a different church, wonderful multi-ethnic church in Nashville, but I remained quite friendly with folks in the PCA. There were a lot of pastors who were great for us, our closest friends. Many of our closest friends are still in the PCA. The small group that we attend from our church is still that same PCA small group. Just a ton of friends there. And one of them reached out to me and asked me to participate in a panel at the General Assembly, which is the annual gathering of sort of elders in the PCA church leaders, and asked me to participate on a panel about supporting pastors in polarized times. And everyone knew when the invitation was issued that there would be some people in the church who were upset. Everyone knew this. And in fact, that was one of the reasons for the invitation, was because I had received a lot of hate and anger from the far right and from the far left, both sides. And so they wanted to talk about, and some of the other panelists who were also on there had received a lot of criticism as well. And so this was coming from people who'd been really in the crosshairs in various ways, trying to share their perspective on how do you walk through all of this polarization, especially when you're somebody who's attacked a lot. So the fact that I was controversial for some folks was one of the reasons why I was on the panel. It's not like this was a news flash. And in fact, internally in the PCA, when my name was floated for the panel, people said, my friends said, I'm happy to invite him, but there will be some people in our congregations who are very angry at this. They're super MAGA or they're very Christian nationalist, and they'll be very angry. And the response was, no, we know, but this is part of the reason. And so for the panel, so the announcement comes, that's trend number one, because a lot of hyper MAGA, super Christian nationalist folks on Twitter just went apoplectic. They went ballistic. They went just totally ballistic. None of this was unexpected. All of this was exactly what I thought would happen. And somebody wrote a parody song based on Richmond, north of Richmond. There were articles in predictable places like the Federalist and the American Reformer. And it was over the top stuff. But Jonah, nothing you and I have not seen before. I mean, how many times, have you looked at something written about you in the Federalist or written about you in and it's just over the top nonsense, name calling. Well, then what happened was all this name calling comes in, and all of a sudden I hear that, they think they made a mistake. They didn't know. I'm thinking, what on earth? So I get a call from a PCA official, and he says, I have to take this to a committee now, but I want to know if you'll withdraw voluntarily. And I said, Heck no. I mean, no, I just don't. I mean, dispositionally, I just don't give in to bullies. And if there was some critique that maybe I don't believe in the creeds and the confessions of the church, and therefore I'm not suitable to talk because I'm not in alignment with the theology of the institution, I could get that. Or, you know, if I was not even a Christian, I could get that. But, you know, what's the real beef here? And so I said, no, I'm not going to voluntarily stop. You invited me. I said yes as a favor. It wasn't getting an honorarium. But I'm just not going to give in to those people. You can choose if you want to give in to them. You can give in to them. It's up to you, but I'm not going to. And so then they not only canceled the panel, they put out a statement. One of the PCA officials put out a statement basically saying, had I known of David's previous writings and the way people understood them, and I was thinking, had you known of my previous writings, I wasn't sending them to a private listserv. Like, I've written all of the stuff that I write in some of the most public places imaginable. But the reason for the cancellation was, well, they just didn't know. And for the peace and purity of the church, they needed to cancel me. And which then led to trend number 2 of all of some of these extraordinarily vicious and malicious people doing all of their victory laps. And then what this does is it sends a message to a whole bunch of other people in the PCA that if I get in the crosshairs of these people, I'm done. I'm toast. The church won't support me. The denomination won't support me, because they folded so fast to a Twitter tempest, you know, so fast it felt like it was like 2016 or 2017 again, back in the days when 12 hours of Twitter could, you know, end careers. And it was just a remarkable turn of events. And I didn't write about it for a while because I just wasn't quite sure. Did I want to? But after a period of time, I just thought this is a story I need to tell, and people need to hear sort of the full truth from my perspective.
The New York Times piece, which we'll put in the show notes and people can find, it's your most recent column. You detail some of it was not new to me, obviously. Yeah. We've talked about a lot of this stuff before.
We've been friends for years and have talked about this. Yeah.
But the question of the racism stuff, because as you say, and I trust me, I completely understand where you're coming from on this, that you were kind of blind to it prior to the age of Trump, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess part of the question is, do you think it was hiding in plain sight and you were truly blind to it? Or do you think it came out in the age of Trump in ways that but for Trump, it would not have come out?
So there are I've heard from a lot of members of the PCA and Black members of the PCA who've said this stuff was there all along, but then also others who've said, and it got much worse. Yeah. So I would say it's a both and, that a lot of the seeds for what we're seeing had been planted a long, long time ago. I did not realize the extent to which there were some factions in the Presbyterian Church in America who actually use a phrase like the Southern Presbyterian Church, hearkening all the way back to the North-South divide in the Civil War. I did not realize, for example, that there is there's a faction in the church, a small one, but it's very, 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 very vocal, of authoritarian Christian nationalists. So there were things, full stop, that I should have seen that I did not see before then. However, also things have changed. Because, Naomi came home in 2010, but everything didn't blow up in our faces until 2015 and 2016. And, what I began to notice was a cultural change where I was, where there was such a shift in approach to way people spoke to each other and interacted with each other. It's as if the Overton window shifted right in front of my face as far as like what was okay to say about race, about sex. I mean, you name it. And so I saw the Overton window move in real time. And so what was weird to me was from 2010 to 2015, we're still the same family. And I'm not going to say we never encountered racist incidents. We did. But after 2015, it just absolutely detonated. Now, part of this was, of course, my, I came out against Trump, and that, put a crosshairs on me. But the way it detonated with the family in general was just because, again, we had been living as a multiracial family in the denomination for several years before Trump came down the escalator. And there's almost an A side and a B side to those two things. And when Trump came down the escalator and I opposed Trump, it's as if the main way to attack me became through the family and through race. And now that wasn't exclusive. Obviously, people were very mad about other reasons, but if people wanted to be truly vile and mean, then they would come at us through our family. And so I think it's both. I mean, I literally genuinely am very sorry that I could not see the things that were there before. But also I will absolutely, to my last breath, say things did change as well. Yeah, it's like a microcosm of the conservative movement, Jonah.
Yeah, sociologically, it's a very familiar story. It's like you go back and you look at people you thought you knew who responded to the Trump era in ways that really shock you, and you never would have predicted prior to 2015. If you describe the events of the Trump era preemptively, like in 2014, say, okay, so there's going to be Donald Trump's going to run, and people are going to start calling him the chosen one, and all these kinds of things, and you're going to go along with it. They would take grave offense with you, and then the body snatcher thing. But like, just to put a point on it, let me ask it this way, contrafactually.
Sure.
Let's say you had gone full-throated MAGA, right? And everything else is sort of the same, except you are now, you're writing for the Federalist and right. all that kind of stuff. Maybe American Greatness. And
this is a counterfactual.
right. And do you think the stuff aimed at your daughter Naomi would have still happened? Do you think it would have happened to a lesser degree? Do you think it would not have happened at all?
So some of the stuff would have happened anyway, some of it. But I would say the lion's share of it would not. And in fact, I would think that had I gone hyper MAGA, and I'm writing in the Federalist and all that, then I think what you would have seen is a lot of people in the MAGA world embracing our family as like, look how diverse, right. And so it's very much the phenomenon that you see in the way like the right has often treated, Black conservatives sort of, okay, once you cross and pass all of our various ideological litmus tests, we're super happy to have you, super happy to hear from you. And someone listening might say, well, that means people are not racist because look, if somebody agrees with them politically, then they're very happy to have them as part of the coalition. And there's an element of truth to that. But what I would say is plainly racist is if somebody is disagreeing with you and the way you choose to attack them is through the race of their daughter.
Right.
It's hard to get more racist than that. But yeah, it's absolutely the case. It's the same, Jonah, for anyone who goes full MAGA. If you go full MAGA, almost no matter what your previous history was, one thing that MAGA is very good at is sort of taking the most aggressive prior opponents, and then as soon as they switch over and bend the knee, it's the bear hug.
Yeah.
There's like J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance was very, 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 it's very obvious when you see person after person, like Ted Cruz pointedly refused to endorse Trump at the convention and then now is in good graces of MAGA. In the counterfactual, going MAGA is like the baptismal waters.
Right.